Hey everyone, it's Eric Green. Want to say hello to everyone in our tax rep community. And I want to talk to you about our sponsor, Call ENQ. And I'm going to just say this. We would not take any sponsor or any product that we do not use ourselves. If you listen to episode 36, Dialing for Dollars, I discussed kind of how we discovered this. It is amazing. It is literally changing the way we practice in our office, right? What Call ENQ does is, you're sick and tired of waiting, right? 30 minutes, 45 minutes, an hour. You finally get through to the IRS. Their system is down. They can't help you. Sometimes they just hang up on you, which is always fun. And then you have the problem is, do you charge the client for this or do you not, right? It's not the client's fault. On the other hand, it's not your fault. Call ENQ says they will get you through to the IRS in under 3 minutes. We are averaging 30 seconds. And when we talk about saving in our business, time is money, right? We think projecting now for the month we've been using this, if we project to a year, we will probably save $50,000 of billable time, right? That is a lot of money that we'd love to have fall to our bottom line. Okay? And I'm sure our clients would rather not pay for. So with that, I'm going to put a link below. Go check out Call ENQ. It is a fantastic service, and I'm telling you, we negotiated for ourselves to get a free 100 minutes as part of our deal with them. All of our tax rep members will get 100 free minutes. You can check it out. You have nothing to lose and a lot of time and money to gain. All right, go ahead and check it out. Log into the forum. Let me know what you think. Hey everybody, welcome back to this week's episode of Tax Rep Network. I'm Eric Green. Very excited for this. I put the message out there. We're going to be talking about how to 10x your tax practice. And there's nobody who knows more about that than my guest this week is Dominique Molina. Dominique, thank you for coming on and doing this. I'm thrilled that we connected, but I'm certainly thrilled you agreed to do this.
Thank you for having me, Eric. It's great to be here.
Yeah, no, and for those of you who are not familiar with Dominique, she is really the driving force and founder of the American Institute of Certified Tax Planners, which is a membership-based organization of 700 plus elite CPAs, tax attorneys, and enrolled agents who focus on delivering a higher level of tax reduction services, how your clients can save money. All right. And by the way, Dominique, I love some of the stuff you've done. You have 5 best-selling books out there about exactly how to save and reduce taxes. I think you have one, How to Live Tax-Free, which I thought was very cute. But yeah, you've been passionate about differentiating the level of tax expertise provided to business owners by providing a higher caliber education program, which is generally not required today by the CPA and EA designations. And by the way, I'm going to correct myself, 6 best-selling books. I'm trying to scroll through all the stuff you've done just to give people an idea of who I have on my program here. You've been an AICPA discussion leader for over 7 years, and you'll be speaking at the AICPA's Women's Global Leadership Summit. That's next month, right? Mid-November,
yeah,
in New York City.
Yes.
You've previously twice been named as top 40 under 40 most influential accounting professionals by CPA Practice Advisor magazine. However, you're not going to reveal to us today if you're still under 40.
That was our deal. We made that deal going into this episode today, Eric.
Yeah, no. And I'll tell you, before we get into this, because there's a ton I want to ask you, forgetting about the listeners, stuff I want to know. But I'll tell you a story. So I made a comment that when I was speaking at the AICPA 2 years ago, and the issue of ethics came up, and I talked about, I'm not Eric Green, I'm not afraid of IRS criminal or exam. They can come audit me anytime they want. In fact, Jeff and I are probably owed money. But what scared me was the Office of Professional Responsibility. That though Karen Hawkins is like 5 feet tall, 100 pounds. That office terrified me. Now, Karen has since retired. and actually is a friend of mine. She'll actually be coming on the podcast, but I talked about that. Well, now fast forward, Karen comes and there's an evening event. She's at the conference. Now there's got to be, I don't know, 1,500 people in this room. She comes in, sees me across the room. I'm 6'2", 250. She sees me through this crowd and beelines through the crowd to me. And she says, Eric, you owe me an apology, which is not what you want to hear, folks, from the head of the Office of Professional Responsibility. And I said, Karen, whatever it is, I'm sorry. And she said, I'm 5'4". But I do like, she said, but I do like the 100 pounds. But anyway, so, you know, I've learned to just watch what I say when it comes to stuff like that. So Dominique, the point of this program was how people can 10X their practice. Now, for those folks who are doing just lots of 1040s and, you know, they're kind of almost like H&R Block, and I don't mean to pick on H&R Block, but, you know, they're sort of like that, sort of just like a 1040 mill kind of a practice. I've been arguing that, you know, given where the landscape has been going, right, we have more and more self-filed returns, 48% last year, and that includes all of those even done by the big firms, you know, the type of 1040s where they're not going to do it themselves, right? I mean, you've already got their multinational, closely held company, you know, big four accounting firm, just do my 1040 at the same time. Not too many CEOs say, you know what, do the companies and all the holding companies and all the hedge funds, but you know what, I'll do my own 1040 on TurboTax. It doesn't happen, right? Just you do my 1040 at the same time. If you pull all of those out, we're really well over 50%. And now with the increased standard deduction, I foresee us going up, and Paul Mamo in IRS and I have been talking about this, we may go up as high as 70% of self-filed. So the 1040, and meanwhile, the average price of a 1040 since 2012 has fallen from $322 to $261 in America. So the 1040 business is shrinking. It is perceived more as a cookie cutter kind of a thing, right? There are 28,000 H&R Block locations. Anyone can do this, right? You just put the stuff in the computer. That people really need to be differentiating themselves. In other words, we need to move into the niche. For me, it's, you know, IRS representation resolution. You know, I've spoken, had Don Brolin on, who's spoken about forensic accounting, and Jim Olson's been on talking about forensic reconstruction. But you're doing like heavy tax planning, all of that stuff. So, you know, I'd like to hear kind of what your perception of all this is. But, you know, after listing all the stuff that you've done, you know, I want to start out mentioning, aside from the coaching and all the speaking you do, and you know, the kind of thought leader that you are, and this is how we met, like through every major conference, you actually have an active accounting practice yourself. How in the world? I do. Well, and listen, I actually have a real law firm here. I got 17, well, we have one person in another office, 17 people if I open my door down this hall right now. I know how I do it, which isn't good. How do you manage everything that you do and continue to always look like you're in control?
It's a fantasy world, isn't it, Eric? You know, little known fact, Willy Wonka was actually a partner in a Big Four firm. The stress and the pressure is what eventually drove him to create a fantasy world of candy. But the pressure of accounting really affects everybody differently. So, you know, maybe you and I just have a different hairstyle and we dress a little differently than Willy Wonka. But yeah, it's stressful, isn't it, at times? And without a great team behind me, and you know, the biggest difference I would say is the number of clients I work with. And certainly, you know, if you're listening into this and you're thinking about how many obligations you have and how many deadlines you have and how many projects you're working on currently, think about just 10% of that, yet 10x your income. And if you can think about that and have a grin on your face, you know, that's really what it's about. That's how you can do these sorts of things and juggle things without it driving you to create fantasy worlds. right? It's about getting paid a little bit differently. And the stats are staggering. You're saying about the cost of the 1040s actually going down. There's very few industries where we see that opposite of inflation. I
Yep.
mean, this in the textile industry is really the only thing I've seen that phenomena with. And that's just because of global workplace. We've got people overseas that will do the garment construction for pennies.
Yep.
And unfortunately, that's the same with tax returns. And as automation has moved in, as you said, and expanded global services, it is tough to compete. So listen, you got to pull yourself out of the commodity business. You just have to, because at a certain point, you're going to get left behind. And that's really what's helped me get to this position where I've got time to play. I've got time to go do these conferences and sit here chatting with you today.
No, it is. And in fact, for the listeners, that's actually what led me to seek out Dominique. So you and I both do speaking for CCH. We both speak at AICPA. We do a lot of the state society stuff. And it was in that running of parallel, I've been kind of watching what you do. And at some point, it was through LinkedIn, you may remember, I actually sent you a message saying, like, I need to talk to you.
Yeah.
we are running in parallel, and you just seem so much calmer about all this than I do. Because the reality is, I have now at this time, like, I have over 200 open matters. And so, for instance, when I spoke out at AICPA in Las Vegas, I would wake up to 87 emails. And not because my clients are harassing me, but because they all have one very important case in their life, their own. And so, just for them to email, say, hey, what's up? To me, it's like a bombardment of it. And, the being able to elevate your practice. And for me, some of it's been automation, some of it has been turning away work that isn't there, but really focusing your practice on those sorts of things that can't be commoditized. And by the way, it's not just the tax world. I've been watching a lot of people in our space, not just accounting, but in the kind of thought leader influencer space, who are talking about, like, manufacturing jobs, 3D printing. They're expecting is going to wipe out 300 million jobs worldwide.
Wow.
Self-driving cars are not for you and I. It's for the trucking industry. There's another 10 million jobs that will probably vanish. So society is in general, but in our niche in particular, I happen to think your message is spot on. That, if you're doing 1040s, if you have some tax knowledge, the money is in applying the knowledge. It's not banging out the return. The return is the commodity. The planning, the all of the consulting kind of stuff that you talk about, I think really is where people need to be looking to move, or at least move into.
You're right. And unfortunately, that's not so obvious to the consumers that are looking in from the outside. Frankly, nobody really wants a tax return. Hell, I don't even want a tax return, right? And I'm in the business.
Right.
But nobody wants to do it. And so you've got somebody that we're dealing with a market that really doesn't want what we have to offer. They do it grudgingly. And at the same time, they don't really understand what goes into it. So some of the opportunities that are there rely on you pulling yourself out of the commodities space. And some of that is just changing perception. It is helping to highlight the value of what you bring to the table, because I got to tell you, the value's not in the paper that the return is printed on.
Right.
But it comes from the expertise that's going into it. Now, if the only thing somebody's getting is that return at the end of the day, then they really are just buying a commodity, and anyone could have prepared that. So the key is, how can you use your expertise to actually sell something either in addition to or instead of, beyond the commoditized product? and people will pay really good money for that. And it feels a lot better, I got to tell you, to use your expertise for something that people really love and appreciate.
And I want to get into the pricing in a moment, but if someone's listening to this, and it could be an attorney, it could be a CPA, an EA, maybe even somebody unenrolled, how do you suggest somebody get started in what I'm assuming is sort of a process to get to where they need to be? I mean, again, I find the biggest issue are people sitting at home. They're listening to this in their car, whatever they're doing, and thinking, that all sounds great. How?
Sure. Oh, yeah, definitely. And especially when it comes to value pricing, the how is often the missing component in these conversations. So I definitely want to get to that today. But I'm a big proponent of starting with, what do you enjoy doing? I think there's an awful lot of people in our industry that either get kind of fall into it by mistake, or maybe they liked one aspect of the job, but they find that they're really pulled in other directions. For example, I see an awful lot of tax professionals that like the tax side, yet have been pulled into the bookkeeping or pulled into the payroll because they felt like that's how they can get their customers. So if you're going to really redesign this thing, like redesign it to be great for yourself, right? So start with, what do you really enjoy most? And let's just say it is bookkeeping or accounting or payroll or tax, or, you could fill in the blank. It could be litigating if you're on the law side. But start with that and then really get past what it looks like on the outside you're doing. Because we forget that. And I know accountants get really caught up in the how-to, which form number we're going to file and how we arrive at that number and which Excel automation we're doing to calculate what we need. And I geek out of this on this stuff all the time, but nobody really cares except for us.
Right.
We have to get beyond that piece of it and get into what people really want. So the first question I want you to ask as you're listening to this, I want you to ask yourself, what is it actually that people are buying from me? Because I'll tell you what, it's not a piece of paper with a certain boxes and form numbers on it. They're also not buying what's in the boxes. Right? But what are they buying? Well, it could be peace of mind. It could be security and knowing that they're following the law. It could be being an upstanding citizen and contributing to our community. And I'll talk about all those things that sound kind of fluffy. It's hard to quantify the value of those, but start there, because that enables you to expand your view a little bit and get more into the shoes of your clients. Very important that we take their perspective about our products and services, because that's the reality we're dealing with, is what is their perspective on what we do.
You said something else which I found fascinating, and I'll tell you, when I reached what I thought was breaking point with just the sheer volume of work and my tax rep members who I have a lot invested in watching them succeed. I really do. It's something we take very seriously about doing this. And I spoke to a friend of mine, Brent Robertson, who's at a company called Fathom in West Hartford. I highly recommend them for people who are looking at disruption and artificial intelligence. But I had coffee with him. I said, everything's going great. The firm is blowing up. I hate that term, blowing up, but you know what I mean? It's really growing, faster than we expected. And then my members are doing terrific and whatever. If I'm doing so great, why am I so miserable? And I remember he said to me you just hit on it. He said, let's back up. What do you want? So what do you mean, what do I want? He's like, what do you want? He said, very simple question, but hard to answer sometimes. What do you want? And I have to tell you, for weeks I mulled that over. What is it that I want? And I remember thinking, I want to be able to help people. And I went back to it. I want to be able to help people. I want to be able to do higher work where I can sit and think and bring value to people. So I don't feel at the end of the day, I just, excuse the term, I just shoveled shit out the door. Because there are a lot of days
Sure.
it felt like that. And he has been instrumental, and I've listened to your stuff, has been instrumental in helping me kind of focus my practice, and even with the tax rep members, help them focus on what it is they want to do and how to do it, and and also sometimes even educate the clients as to what the client should want, right? As far as, like you said, it's not the piece of paper, that's almost the scorecard. If you've done the planning and you've helped them, and the way I've put it before is the time to really use your accountant isn't during tax season. It's the couple times a year at least, if not monthly, quarterly, whatever, that you're meeting with them doing planning. In March and April, it's too late. It's post-mortem in a way. The stuff where you can really make the big difference is in helping them in advance and do the planning and make their moves and structure things, so that at the end of the year they're living for, quote unquote, a tax-free life, or as close to a legitimate tax-free life as they can. By the way, I have clients living a tax-free life that shouldn't be and go to jail. But that's not what we're talking about here.
That's not the kind of tax-free life I'm a proponent of, Eric.
Right, exactly. Well, we're talking about, like everything else. I got a comment. It's very funny. In the news recently has been the Jared Kushner, that he pays no taxes. And my comment to them was, yeah, good. He's done his planning. If you're a real estate investor and cost segregation studies and 179 and accelerating depreciation and whatnot, there's a lot of time where legitimately you're not going to pay a lot of tax. That's one of the beauties of being in that field, that industry, if you will. So no, I think your points are really well taken as far as what you, the accountant, want, but also looking at what the client really needs. But if you don't mind, let's talk a little bit about pricing, because you had mentioned to me in another conversation about alternatives in pricing. What do you mean by that?
Yeah, I mean, alternatives, I think, can mean a couple of different things. One is offering people choices. Okay, and so allowing them to make a choice about what price they want to pay you. Now, let's be clear. What I don't mean is that they tell you your price is too high, can I pay something else? And then you offer them something lower.
Yeah.
That's not what I mean by price. However, you can offer different levels of service. And people like choices. They like to feel that they have a say in the matter and they're making an educated financial decision. And we see this so commonly, right? I mean, American Express, probably super common knowledge that they've got these different credit card plans that you can participate in. And you don't hear the basic green card person stamping their feet that they don't have the black card benefits. They just chose to get the green card instead of the black card. And the black card is a lot more expensive. Right? And we see this in everything from food packages of meals in restaurants to amusement parks to banking and financial services. People want to have a choice. And so when you can come in with different options, now you want to make it obvious too and appealing to someone for them to pay your premium price. And that's where you get into knowing what they want. Now, let's not kid ourselves. There are people out there that maybe are focusing on the commodity. Don't worry about it. You can change. So if you're looking at what you offer today and you say, gosh, well, I do, that is what I sell, paper with the right form printed on it. Well, let's get you out of that, right? So start by thinking about what is it that you can offer. And I love your example, Eric, of, getting to how did you arrive at those numbers on the page? If they're meeting with you throughout the year. And if they're not, make it a point to change that, to illustrate exactly what they can get from planning in advance and working with you. in advance. This is all very changeable, even if it feels overwhelming and it feels impossible to shift. You actually can do this with existing clients. You can shift their perspective, but it really starts with getting at the wants. What do they want in what you offer? Even accounting, we know what goes into it. And as accounting professionals, we know how to make good decisions using the financial statements to guide the business and to make improvements in profitability. But just simply issuing a financial statement on a page doesn't do that. It's the thinking that goes beyond it. So I love what you said when you're analyzing, what do I like to do? And you said, I love to think. I love to sit at my desk and I love to problem solve and strategize and play that chess game. So, but it's time to get beyond, the physical appearances of what we do. And if you are currently selling printed financial statements, or in today's world, we don't even print them anymore, they're just electronic. Think about what that really is. And if you're selling somebody access to information that helps guide them in the management of their business, then it's time to really highlight that. And that becomes your product. The financial statements are just an ancillary to that main product or service, which is, increased profitability in the business.
Absolutely. So what do you suggest when it does come to pricing? Do you think there's a best way to value your services?
Well, the best way, I think, is to be able to highlight the value for your ideal market. And this is where it gets subjective, right? Because we all place a different value on what's there. And so if you want to value price, then you, A, better be able to deliver value, and B, you better be able to quantify and help the prospect see that value as well. And I think that's a scary prospect for those of us in the industry that are so deadline driven and just kind of surviving one due date till the next, because we often don't have the luxury of putting in anything extra on a file. The beauty of value pricing is that that's what you get paid to do. In reality, you do get paid for the extra. So it may start with you initially putting in some additional value. Hey, I did your tax return, but I also wanted to just show you some things that I took away. And Fathom is a great example. I love Fathom, and that's a great example of where you might bring in additional value to a tax return or to a set of financials. When you can benchmark and compare to other companies in the same industry. And if you don't have that data, can you just compare year over year and come to some analysis, which is really the value part that they can use to make some informed decisions in the business? You can start with that. And if you can quantify the value of that advice, that makes it a lot easier then to give context and meaning to your prices. I often say if somebody called me on the phone and said, how much do you charge? They probably would never speak to me again if I actually gave them a quote, because I charge a minimum fee of $35,000 to be a client right now. The $35,000 is meaningless without context. What are they actually getting for the $35,000? Now, on the other hand, if they understand that I can save them more than 6 figures a year off of their tax bill, and I help them improve their profitability by 10%,
no brainer.
Now the $35,000 has context. And as you say, no brainer, right? They can make that financial educated decision. So I think it means different things depending on the market that you're working with. Now, clearly, it'd be tough for me to go into a market where people are making, an average of $50,000 a year, and then try to charge them $35,000. Again, I probably wouldn't have much success with that. And so that's where choosing the appropriate target market comes in. So it's different depending on who you're talking to.
Yeah, no, and it's funny because I when I have my for tax rep members, it's about $300 a month is what it comes. It's about $297 a month. If you start building your practice and you're getting an average of $7,500 to $10,000 per client, it's a no-brainer. I mean, you see, yeah, I mean, my members, I mean, and I have many of them have emailed me, $3,500, I turned it into $150,000, bottom line.
Right.
I mean, it really is a no-brainer. And so what you're saying makes a lot of sense. So given that, what are the next logical steps for someone who wants to adopt the value pricing model?
Say that one more time.
So, you're talking, how you spoke about value pricing. And
Right.
For somebody who's listening to that, who has been very caught up in the commoditization aspect of their practice,
Yes.
what would be the next logical steps for them to take to try to put a value pricing model in place?
Yeah, that's a great question. And that's really the most important part of all this is the how, right? Nobody ever talks about the how. They just say value price, value price, value price.
Yep.
But what really needs to happen is that thoughtfulness that goes into it and the intention. Exactly what you were sharing a few moments ago is if you're going to change something, then really get into what you want it to be. So really focus on and get clarity on what do you want to be paid for? What do you enjoy doing most? What do you want your work life to look like? I did this exercise myself recently because it's something you come back and revisit. You should revisit regularly so that you can continue refining. And I decided, I really don't ever like having more than 4 things in one day. So I just said, okay, from now on, I'm not doing anything more than 4 things in one day because I need room to breathe. I need room to think. I need room to focus. So getting that specific is really imperative in this process. And then again, thinking about what is the real result that you deliver. Is it saved money? Is it improved profitability, which again is another way of saying saved money? Is it increase in revenues? Is it an increased presence in the marketplace? And once you get that down, and you may need some input from others on this. We tend to see things from our side and from our perspective. Ask a group of people. Go around asking family and friends, what do you think you get when you buy a tax return or when you buy payroll services or when you buy bookkeeping or when somebody helps you solve your IRS problems? What is it that you think you really get? And that can be instrumental in just helping to understand the client's perspective. That's what we're looking for. We're looking for what do they want from their perspective. And then the next step is you want to be able to quantify that as much as you can. Now, sometimes that's not always possible to do. Again, we go back to like payroll services. Well, what is the value of the payroll services? Well, perhaps you can quantify that as an expression of saved time. How much is the business owner currently wasting on payroll time away from their revenue producing efforts? That might be one way to quantify it. Or it could be an expression of reduced penalties because the payroll is going to be done accurately. Tax resolution services, it's a little bit easier to quantify because if you're successful in abating penalties, for example, great way to express the value is that, hey, right now you're facing $8,200 in penalties. I can get 60% of these forgiven. And therefore, you're able to present it to them as your value. Same thing with tax planning. And I think that's what I love about tax planning most is that very easy to see your value in dollars and cents. And then what you want to do is you want to set your prices. And when you set your prices and you communicate your prices to your clients, you want to be able to give them that context. So it's not enough for me to say, for example, I'm going to save you a whole lot of money on your penalties. Instead, by saying, I can save you $4,800 off of your penalties, and the cost for that work is going to be $2,900. Now what you've done is you've given them enough information to make an educated financial decision, and at the end of the day, you've just now value priced.
Now, all of this makes tremendous sense. Now, there are some, I'm trying to think how to say this. There are some services that have perhaps more emotional value than others. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
How do you value price those services?
Yeah, I mean, it's an excellent point, and I tend to stay towards tax planning because it's a lot easier to value price, in my opinion. But one thing I've found that works, Eric, is to those things that are the services that are a little bit more difficult to quantify. And I just suggested payroll, but I would say accounting and consulting sometimes fall in that category, because it's not as simple as being able to say, hey, I can save you X amount of dollars. And so what I've found works in that situation is to combine those services with other services that you can quantify. So in other words, if you're able to abate penalties, package that or bundle that together with your accounting services or with your payroll services or with your services that are more difficult to quantify. And that way, as a package, you're assigning a value to that package. So let me give you an example. In the tax planning world, it's not uncommon for us to save 5, 6, 7 figures a year from someone's tax liability, and that's real money. That's cash in their pocket. And so if I sell a package offering, for example, that includes, consultations through the year, and it includes their tax return preparation, it includes, reviewing their books and making sure that things tick and tie and that they're clean and that retained earnings rolls forward. When I package all of those things together, I can say, this is how much my services are worth. I'm saving you $2,394 per year. And this is the cost of those services. You want to be as specific as possible, again, because when I say I save you a lot, and I've found even to say, I save you 10%, well, what does that really mean? Most people don't have a sense for what they owe in tax. So if I save you 10%, that's really vague. On the other hand, if I tell them in dollars and cents how much I saved them or I can save them, now that's much more specific. So it gives real meaning behind my price. They understand the financial results of what we're creating together.
It makes perfect sense. What I'm wondering about, because so much of what I do is marketing, right? My own firm,
Right.
for my members. How do you manage? I'm curious how you manage to use this to differentiate yourself, or how one of your coaching members manages to use this to differentiate themselves in the marketplace. Like do you? I mean, does the value pricing does it come into the marketing, and if so, I'm curious how.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, absolutely. And I think what you're kind of describing when you talk about differentiation, it's that blue ocean strategy, right? Did you read that book? I don't know if you read the book several years ago, The Blue Ocean Strategy. It really is about an argument or a point of view that companies can succeed by creating uncontested market space. So you create your own blue ocean as opposed to a red ocean where competitors fight for dominance, and it's an ocean full of vicious competition that turns red with blood. So aside from, being non-gory, I like the blue ocean because no competition exists. And so when you price this way, the pricing alone differentiates yourself. But I got to say, even focusing on the results piece is a great differentiator, right? Because what we're doing is we are focusing on what people want, the most important piece of the engagement. And because so few of us do that, it really is this blue, uncontested market space out there in the ocean of competitors. And so that's the beauty in this, is that it does allow you to focus on what's most important. Hey, you know what? We work in an industry, whether you're on the law side or on the accounting side, we work in an industry that really focuses on the billable hour being the most important number in the business. How does that benefit the customer? It doesn't.
And it's fascinating that you bring that up, because so many law articles now keep talking about how the billable hour is dead. And, it's, I think we are going to get there, but the rest of the world needs to catch up, meaning the rest of the population that is very used to dealing with lawyers on an hourly basis. And I got to tell you,
Sure.
it affects your relationship. I find clients don't want to spend the time with me because they know they're on the clock. But if I have value build, which we do actually with offers, when I do an offer and compromise, we charge $4,500, and because I found over time that was the time it really kind of took. There are some we spend more, some we spend less, but it allows me to sit and talk and think with the client and follow up without the client either A, trying to ignore me, or B, try to get rid of me because they know they're on the clock. When they're not on the clock, we can actually have meaningful conversations about things. And, it's very interesting. And your whole program and what you've done for people and your members is really, it's really unbelievable. And I am going to urge the people listening to go check that out. Now, Dominique, we have a bunch of Q&A. I did let people know that they could email in questions to the podcast, which I've never done before, by the way. It's always been just sort of me or the guest just speaking. But I let them know they can email podcast@taxrepllc.com. We've got a bunch of questions. I've sent you a bunch that came in for you. Before we get into that, for those folks here who want to get a hold of you, and I will put a link below in the podcast description, how does somebody get a hold of you that would like, an accountant who wants to begin this process and work with you to do that?
Yeah, that's great. A great question. Simply go to certifiedtaxplanners.com, and that's planners with plural. So certifiedtaxplanners.com. I've got a lot of great resources that are free that you can download from the website directly. And of course, you're welcome to get in touch with me on LinkedIn as well. That's how you and I met, Eric.
Yep.
And surprisingly, we haven't bumped into each other in the halls of all these great conferences that we go to.
It's really my own.
Some great resources there.
Yeah, no, and it's really my own problem. But first of all, a couple things. You mentioned the free resources. Everyone loves the theory of free. But in light of what we've been talking about, don't be afraid, to the people listening to this, do not be afraid to spend money that will help you 10x your practice. I have to tell you, when I was first struggling, I hired a coach to help me, and it was $1,500 for 2 hours, and I had angst over this. Now, remember, at the time, I'm probably $350 an hour myself, but I finally was like, you know what? I think I need to do this. I did it for 3 months. That was the best $4,500 I have ever spent. It's probably brought in $1 million of business. What she helped me kind of see that I was not getting my message across, that,
And it's good to find people who, you can't be an expert at everything. And, in many ways, you've blazed a trail that people can follow. And so free resources are lovely. Do not be afraid to invest. Think of it as you're investing in yourself. You're investing in your career. You're going to go buy, you're going to go buy something that's a commodity. Then you're value shopping. Not when it comes to this kind of stuff. Well,
and I think it's important too, Eric, to model the behavior that you expect to receive from your clients.
Right.
I think far too many of us say, do as I say, not as I do.
Right.
And, if you're looking to get paid premium fees and for people to decide and be decisive in working with you and appreciate what you bring to the table, then you have to do the same thing yourself. You have to model that behavior. So you can't expect to go through life cutting corners and being penny wise and pound foolish, as the saying goes, and then expect your clients to be different. You're going to attract the same type of client as the behavior you exhibit yourself. So that's one easy change for people to make, is to really focus on what behavior characteristics are they looking for in their clientele. I'll tell you, it makes a lot better tax practice when I am working with people that are a joy to work with, because I have attracted those folks to work with me in my business. Right.
No, I absolutely, I couldn't agree more. I couldn't agree more. And you've given me such great advice. So I will definitely put that link below, www.certifiedtaxplanners.com. Go check out and do follow Dominique online. There's a lot of great stuff that she puts out. Again, it's free, but it's modeling the people. You follow people. Very few people blaze a trail from scratch. People have gone before you. And maybe it's modified, maybe it'd take a turn or a twist, but very rarely do I find that I'm inventing the wheel from scratch. I may be fixing it or changing it, but it's been done before. And to seek out people that have done this who can help you is very helpful. So with that, Dominique, why don't we get into some of our questions, because I know your time is limited, and I appreciate your carving out time to do this. Really, trust me, the pleasure is all on this side. But we got a question, I think it was really aimed at both of us. A question is how to hire and develop the right staff to support you in taking this next step. I'm growing and just moved to a new office. I need to hire and restructure some of my staff. What are the most specific skills that I should be looking for in the new age of millenniums? Gwen. You want to go first, Dominique, or you want me to?
Yeah, no, happy to go first. I appreciate that the question listed specifically working with millennials. I promised I would not reveal my age, and you promised you wouldn't ask me my age on this on this interview, Eric. But what I can tell you is that working with millennials is different than anything I've experienced in my career in over 20 years. And there's definitely different motivations there. There's definitely a different set of qualifications is what I'm seeing coming out of colleges right now. And so it definitely takes a different approach. And what I'm seeing on this side, and it's actually a really scary thought on the accounting side, what I'm seeing is that we have a decline in the number of students that are entering this profession. And frankly, I believe, this is just my own opinion here, there's nothing scientific that says this, but I believe it's that this generation of workers is just refusing to work this way. They say 60, 70 hours a week, no thank you. I don't want to work that way. So the first thing I would recommend you do is really, again, take the perspective of the potential employee that you want to attract. If you're looking to attract the top talent, someone who takes ownership of their work, somebody who's dedicated and loyal, somebody who's smart, somebody who can anticipate well and identify needs before they come up. Imagine what it's going to take to attract them. And then look around your workplace. Is that the type of workplace that somebody with those great characteristics is going to want to work? Because I have to tell you, Eric, I went through this myself many years ago, and I looked around my office and asked myself that question, and I said, nobody's going to want to work here. Stacks and stacks of files everywhere, and people stressed out and running and working late and grumpy and hungry and tired. And is that really going to attract the personality and the qualities of someone that can really be the best to work on my team? And so I think that's a really great place to start, is to think about how you bring that in. And again, just talking to people and asking, what are some of those little perks that people look for? Eric, I went to a tech company recently, and the office spaces of these tech companies out here in California, it's phenomenal. I don't know if you've ever been to the Google campus or Facebook or Twitter, but I mean, it's amazing. They've got giant big wheels that these kids are driving around to get from place to place on campus. They've got private chefs that make their meals. I went to this one, Eric, and they had a cereal bar. You go down this long counter and you can get any kind of cereal you can imagine. Anytime you want, you just go and get a bowl of cereal.
Right.
And I thought, wow, that's a pretty neat benefit. Now, it's not that expensive to offer cereal to your employees, but isn't that kind of a cool feature? So that would be my advice, is really think about what kinds of small benefits that you can afford, because that's the reality, is most people don't have endless budgets in what they can afford to offer, but you can often attract really great people just by being different. How can you differentiate yourself in the marketplace? We've got Massage Thursdays here in my office. And
Wow.
It's not a huge deal, but again, it's that little thing so that people go, wow, I want to work there.
Yep. No, my approach to this question is sort of similar. I don't know, Dominique, if you went through this process, but when I started in accounting, they gave you a phone book and a 10 key, and they'd make you sit there and bang numbers, because it was sort of almost like this rite of passage. They had to make you miserable for a while. And it was drudgery work, but you had to work your way up the ladder. My experience with millennials isn't that they're entitled. It's the fact that in some ways, I mean, the comfort with technology is fantastic. But they're not entitled. They're impatient. They want to make an impact now. And so the thought that, thankfully, we have a small firm. There's no one who would come here as an associate or as an EA and do drudgery work. It's not going to happen. We're too small. You're going to be dealing with clients from the word go and all of that. Even with the automation and the stuff we're putting in place, no one's going to sit and do that. But what I have found is, I think this generation is not willing to stomach that. Well, what you and I think I'm older than you, what I certainly went through, and frankly, probably you did too, to a certain extent, because it hasn't been that long since it's changed. That old sort of a pyramid model of you just drudge, you work your way up, and someday, my sense is that they're not willing to wait like that. And they don't want to live that kind of lifestyle. And quite frankly, they're probably going to be a lot healthier than we are, because it took me a long time to come to that, where the discussion with Brent from Fathom was, what do you want? And what I began to realize is I could build the pyramid the same way they used to, but I didn't want that pyramid.
Right.
Or Matthew McConaughey the actor gave a great talk where he said, we're going to go take the hill, but first of all, what's your hill? figure out what it is you want, which can be a difficult thing. I struggled with it for a while. But no, I think so. I think when what you're looking at is with millennials, recognize that they have skill sets. And in many ways, I'm almost going to go on a limb. You may have to change the way you practice, but frankly, it's smarter. By here, I mean, we've done things the same way Jeff and I did for 20 years. We are now automating stuff. A CRM system, our retainer agreements, and it's not even to try to nickel and dime here and there. It's I have staff now that are very into that. That makes the job exciting for them, and they're pushing us. Frankly, they're advancing us, and I'm okay with letting some of the reins go and letting them, take some ownership, and I think it really helps. Versus whereas before, I literally had a manager say this: you'll come in on Saturday and you'll sit here because I told you to, whether you have work or not. I remember FaceTime at a Big Four firm. They told me, you're coming in on Saturday. Why? Just because.
Well, I appreciate that you said that. It's and it's better for us too, right? Who really wants to work that way? And just because it's been done and we paid our dues, trust me, I have carried enough supervisors' bags out in the audit field to earn myself my place, right? But that doesn't mean it has to continue that way. I think sometimes we repeat what was done before us because we just don't know any other way. And so that can be very difficult, is imagining it where you want it to be. But it doesn't have to be. So I appreciate that you said that. And I also appreciate you shared about the impatience quality. I think that's a much better way of looking at that characteristic that we're kind of seeing with our new grads coming into the profession.
I hadn't thought of it, but I try my best to listen to motivational speakers and coaches and people who really, because I always pick up something. And Simon Sinek, the consultant, gave a interview on London Real, and I caught it on YouTube or whatever. I was listening through my radio in the car, but it was, and he talked about that, and he mentioned that it was impatience, and I was like, you know what? That's it. He just nailed it. That's it. It's not a entitlement thing. I couldn't put my finger on it, but that's really what it is. I think it's a little bit of an impatience, because a lot of the barriers you and I had, they don't have. I mean, they can connect now to the founder of LinkedIn. They can connect to Sir Richard Branson. I mean, the ability to reach people, whereas you and I had to go through gatekeepers to try to get to people. Right. Not anymore. It really is. I mean, the world has really changed. Okay, and now I'm getting questions. My questions are much more kind of geared toward what I do. Eric, how do you get started finding clients to resolve their tax problems? Well, David, there are more than 14 million accounts in the collection division inventory. About 1 out of every 15 taxpayers in America owes the government money. There are more than 7 million non-filers that the government right now is gearing up to go after, right? Mary Beth Murphy and Paul Mamo, who are friends of mine. Mary Beth is the Commissioner for Small Business Self-Employed Division of IRS. Paul is the Director of Collections. They are going to be rolling out a new initiative focused on non-filers. So, David, to be honest with you, they're everywhere. What I tell my tax rep members and the folks who listen to this podcast, and obviously you're one of them, you've heard before, the biggest thing in this niche is to let people know that you do it, is to get the word out. I personally like blogging and social media. I do not buy lean lists. I do not put a lot of money into my marketing effort other than I pay for a blog that really ranks very well. Dominique has kind of helped me move into the Facebook arena. But other than that, I'm not taking radio ads or any of that, and you don't have to. You don't have to. The need is there. You just really got to focus and get your message out there. Dominique, you want to tackle one?
Excellent. Yeah, so I've got a question here from Charisse. It says I think what you're asking is how to find clients that pay you this much. I have saved someone $500,000 on a tax liability and received nowhere near $29,000. Yeah, that's a great question. So, and it gets to the heart of who you're targeting. And exactly what I was saying a few moments ago, you know, if I charge somebody $35,000, I'm probably not going to find that I can deliver enough value for someone who makes, say, $50,000. So what you want to start doing is, and it's real simple, you can kind of back into that number. So if you're looking at the tax planning side and I want to charge $29,000, as you've said, Sharice, then back into that number. Now, you know, how much do you need to save them where it makes $29,000 feel like a smart financial decision? You know, I don't know, that's subjective, you tell me, but you know, would saving somebody $100,000, for example, make sense for them to then spend 29? Possibly. So then you can answer the next step, you know, well, who is paying at least, they have to pay at least 100 if you're going to save them 100, right? Who pays at least $100,000 in tax? Well, probably people that make at least $300,000 in taxable income. And you can kind of go from there, you know, well, how much revenue does somebody make who has taxable income of 300,000? Well, you know, that looks a little different after tax reform, right, Eric? And they take away our SALT deduction, but
Yes.
you know, roughly somebody who makes about $500,000 a year. Well, who makes $500,000 a year? And so on and so on. So you can kind of just keep needling down and drilling down into getting more and more specific. I would also answer in that question, you know, who do you enjoy working with? I love working with service professionals. I'm a service professional. I understand the business, the ins and outs. I have an affinity with other service professionals. I feel like educated service professionals respect the value of the expertise and education of the professional involved. And, you know, so that's kind of how I approach that. But I think you bring up a good point, Sharice, and that is you do have to get specific and clear on who you're targeting when you approach people with this offer.
Yep. Nope. I think it's great advice. Okay. That was the same as the other one. What is the difference between your two books? Obviously, they're talking about me because I have 2, you have 6. All right, Walter, the difference, one is the Guide to IRS Collection and the other is Guide to Resolving Tax Debts. Very quickly, the Guide to Collection is going to walk you through the collection process. I figure my feeling is you can't really do this if you don't understand the process. A lot of the confusion in this area comes from people just not understanding how it works. And it's fairly straightforward and simple. That's what the first book does. The second book, we now get into the nitty-gritty of how to calculate an offer and compromise, how to calculate an installment agreement, what does uncollectible status mean, and how do you go about achieving that or getting a client in CNC status. So the first book is your global overview. The second book now is your deep dive. All right. Hopefully that kind of clarifies that. Dominique, do you have another one?
I don't see that. The next one I have, Eric, is very similar to the first one and just talking about how do you get clients to agree to the higher tax price. And so I've shared, you know, the value proposition. I think the other thing that's really important is that you have the confidence to walk in there to ask for that much money. You know, think about this comparison. You know who F. Lee Bailey is, right, Eric? You're an attorney.
Of course.
I think most people know famed defense attorney F. Lee Bailey. And, you know, if F. Lee Bailey walked into a room and asked for $200 to do some work, people would be very, very shocked and maybe even hesitant about working with him. On the other hand, F. Lee Bailey has no problem walking into a room and commanding thousands of dollars per hour. That is the type of confidence you need behind you. Sometimes when we're insecure about our fees, we're unsure, we're hesitant, we project this energy of deception. And that's definitely not something we want to put out there. When you're in this business, we need people to trust us. And so even though your intention is not to deceive someone, if you're feeling really jumbly and nervous on the inside, sometimes people pick up on that and they think, ooh, this Eric guy, he's not being honest with me. So it really does take some practice, but it first starts with believing in yourself and recognizing what you do that really benefits people. I mean, do I think paying $29,000 to save $300,000 is a good deal? Absolutely. I mean, I wish I could do that in all my business dealings, right? Where somebody tells me I'm going to give you $300,000, it's only going to cost you $29,000. And so believing in your abilities and believing in the value you create yourself is a great place to start.
No, I agree. And you may also, Zig Ziglar talked about how you had to be passionate about what you were selling. One of the greatest salesmen in the world, Zig Ziglar, used to talk about passion. And I think that's what he's talking about is, you're talking about being, confident. I think it's when you're excited about something and that confidence sort of comes through, that it's infectious. People like, I think this is the guy or the gal. I mean, she's excited about this. She can answer my questions. And so partly I do think to pile on here, I do think you need to be passionate about what it is you're going to be doing. If you're going to try to sell high-end consulting services and you don't want to be a high-end consultant, that will come through. If you're going to try to do tax resolution and the last thing you want to do is talk to the IRS, that will come through. And I think partly it's figuring out what you want, being passionate about it. And then Dominique, like you said, the confidence, and that will come through when you meet with people and talk to people. And it is, I think in many ways, it's infectious. When people leave my office, they say, I feel better. It's partially because I sit there and I feel confident, no problem. We've got this. Right. And that's, they do pick up on that. So I've got a handful of questions. My sense has been that lawyers handle IRS rep matters, but I heard you say at the AICPA, oh, okay, Beth, AICPA, that isn't true. Explain why that is. If you want some numbers, Beth, when I created the CCH program, because we went and looked, in Martindale-Hubbell, 983 or 986 lawyers listed tax controversy or IRS representation as a area that they dealt with. Go and look today, it's 172. Now, why is that? It used to be years and years ago, Dominique, you could appreciate this, people would go into the government, work for 4 years, and then leave and go into industry. Accounting firms, law firms, nobody leaves the government anymore. The upheaval that we've seen in law firms have laid off partners, all of that has led to government people staying in the government and waiting out their pensions. So with fewer people leaving government, that whole former population of former DOJ, IRS lawyers aren't doing this. The vast majority of people doing resolution work are accountants. And you don't have to be a lawyer. We do very little litigation, very little. All right, we do a lot of litigation, but not in the tax area. We settle 99% of our tax court cases. If you've got a good case, the government's going to settle. If the government has a good case, we're going to settle. We'll get what we can and get out of there. Not too many people want to throw $100,000 at a loser of a case.
Right.
Okay, well, this was about building your practice. Eric, to build a representation practice, if I can only do one thing, someone has read that book. If you can only do one thing, what should I do? Ted. All right, Ted, I have also read the book, which I think is called The One Thing, right? And the theory is, look at what you've got to do and what is the one thing I can do that makes everything else superficial or unnecessary. In the marketing side, blogging, I think. I think blogging is the number one thing on the marketing side for what I do. And Dominique, please feel free to jump in if you have a slightly different take, because again, you're doing something a little bit different. And the reason I say blogging is if that were the one marketing activity I was going to do, my blog entries end up on my social media, and they end up, each one is its own little mini website. If I'm doing 2 blogging entries a week, which I try to do, at the end of the year, I have 100 more mini websites that have also gone out on all of my social media platforms with good content, all right, valuable quality content. Now, of course, I also podcast, I do live speaking, I write some articles from time to time, I got the books. But if you had to pick one thing, for me, it would be blogging. Dominique, what do you think in the coach, not the coaching, but in the tax consultant area? What would be the one thing you would
planning?
Exactly.
Yeah, my answer would be a little bit different, Eric, and it's just because I'm lazier than you. So, I don't have a whole lot of time to be doing all that blogging, and but I understand where you're coming from, and I think it's a great way to get your content out there, and it's a great way to demonstrate your expertise. When people find you online and through social media, and they can see, gosh, this guy, he knows what he's talking about. My advice for you would be to look for influencers. Who else targets the same market that I do, that has relationships with the people I want to have relationships with? And is there a smart way that we can team up together, whether that's they're introducing me, or I'm coming and speaking at an event that they host, or is there something that I can offer that makes them look better? Perhaps, for example, I can give them copies of my book to give as gifts, or I can offer to do a review of their tax return to see what's missing as a value add for that person. Or perhaps the person just likes me so much that they're willing to refer me. But I like that because it's a great way to get connected with a lot of different people through the same effort. And that's the lazy person's way of going about it. So I'm pretty lazy.
Okay, no, but actually it's a very good point. And I mentioned earlier the fact with LinkedIn and Facebook, we now have access to people that we would never have had access to before. That is one of those, it really is very cool. And on that note, NYU, the Stern School, did a talk about a year and a half ago called the future state of the digital workforce. And Dominique, what they talked about is the concept of graduating and going to work for a company and being in the company, that is going to go away in many respects. And what they foresaw happening was something more along the following. I need to pull together a team. I can go on LinkedIn, find the talent that I need. Dominique, I need your help. Joe, I need your help, whatever. And we can pull together a team to get something done, almost like a team of independent contractors, and then everyone kind of goes off on their own way again. That the thought that you had to hire and keep certain talent in the company, that old-fashioned brick and mortar sort of theory is going to go away.
Yes.
And it's almost like you and I saying, look, we're going to come together with consulting, and I'm going to grab Brent from Fathom, which is the Fathom up here, the consulting firm, not the Fathom software company, and we're going to go to town on this thing, but that's kind of it. And then we each have our own sort of other things going on, but you can pull together these amazing teams of people. And where you're going with, I agree, is that expanding your network on social media. You know what? In light of this, I'm going to change my mind. Screw the blogging. The finding influencers and it really expanding your social network, social media network. Truthfully, it probably is time better spent. I would agree with that. Okay, and I've got a couple questions that are similar to the others. if I join tax rep, how long am I locked in? Tracy, 1 month. It's monthly. You can drop it any time. We've never had anyone. We've had 2 people actually leave Dominique in 4 years. One died and one retired.
Whoa.
So, I mean, I've actually never lost a member because, the truth is, hopefully you're seeing the kind of success that, you don't want to leave. So, in fact, I have a few that really should leave. They're successful enough, but for some reason they like me. I don't know why. And then my last question, Eric, had a client whose offer was denied. IRS said they could afford to pay back taxes. We argued they should accept less. They wouldn't budge. Do offers really work, Mike? Mike, absolutely they do. But here's what happened. Your client showed the ability to full pay. And in 2012, with the Fresh Start Initiative, they rolled out very helpful. But the one thing the IRS did with one hand they give, with the other they taketh away. What they did is they added in something into the Internal Revenue Manual that said, if the client can full pay within the time remaining on the collection statute, they're not offer eligible. So if you get the books or you've listened to the podcast, you should know the following. The first step you'd always do is income versus the expenses. You apply the standards, you come down to the net number. The next thing is you want an offer, like the podcast, you want an offer and compromise, go shopping. What do I mean by that? Look at what they're not spending but could. And can we make them an offer candidate? Can we legitimately change that taxpayer's picture so that they cannot full pay? All right, that could be the difference of full paying $200,000 back through an installment agreement or getting rid of the whole debt for $12,000, which I did a couple weeks ago for somebody. All right, so remember the strategies. All right, we've talked about it in the podcast. If you got the books, if you're tax rep, we've got the training videos. Yeah, there's a 3-step process to an offer that the true Jedi Master, I like to think of myself that way, does is the initial analysis, then the application of the standards, and now it's like the Rubik's Cube you pick up and you have to look at from all 3, 4 sides, 5 sides, 3-dimensional thinking. How do I change this picture to minimize their offer, get them into the offer program, but legitimately, we do not commit fraud, all right? We never do that. But are there things that we could be spending on that we're not? Health insurance, life insurance, disability insurance. Go lease a new car. Spend $497 a month. Get rid of the junker. Are there things legitimately we can do? So yes, Mike, offers do work, but you got to follow the rules. And listen, if you get to the point where this person cannot do an offer, we don't file the offer. I got better things to do with my time. My clients have way better things to do with their money. If there's no chance of it going through, don't do it. So with that, Dominique, I am out of questions. I really want to thank you for doing this. I want to do this again, and more in particular, as I get more questions about your program, I'd love to have you come back on because I
would love to be back on. It's been a pleasure. I love chatting with you. You've got some really cool stories and a lot of expertise to share, so I appreciate the opportunity.
Yep. No, and if nothing else, I know I'll see you in Vegas at the AICPA, but hopefully it'll be before then. But listen, thank you for doing this. Everyone, thank you for listening. I am going to put the link below. Go check out what Dominique is doing, both LinkedIn and the other stuff online, but certainly www.certifiedtaxplanners.com. And thank you all for listening in. Keep building your practices and have a great day. And Dominique, again, thank you.
Thank you.
Hey, everybody. I hope you enjoyed this episode of Tax Rep Network podcast. Listen, there has never been a better time to build a representation practice, right? The 1040 business is not a growth industry right now. With more than 14 million accounts in the collection division inventory and more than 7 million non-filers that the IRS has identified and going to begin going after, this is the time when your skills are needed. Worried you don't really know what to do, think you need training, think you need coaching, think you need somebody to back you up. That's what Tax Rep is, right? Come join our community, begin building your practice, make more money, add 100,000 or more to your bottom line, and know that you've got us watching your back. You have questions about a case, issues with marketing, how to market, you want to use our marketing materials, it is all there for the members in our site. All right. So come check us out. We'd love to have you join us if you haven't already. Right. Keep building on your practice. Keep helping taxpayers. Have a great day.